Have you ever looked in the mirror and realized the man staring back isn't you anymore, but someone she molded, one quiet compromise at a time? Man is nothing else but what he makes of himself. Jean-Paul Sartre wrote those words, and yet many men never truly grasp their weight until it's too late. You didn't mean to change. It wasn't overnight. But slowly, piece by piece, you transform not into your best self, but into the version of you that made her life easier, calmer, more convenient. You stopped being wild, unreadable, free. You looked into her eyes and stopped seeing your own reflection. You may have never opened being in nothingness, but it has shaped your existence more profoundly than any self-help book on your shelf. Sartre, writing under the shadow of war in a defiant Paris, gave us a truth that should be tattooed onto every man's soul. Hell is other people, not because people are cruel, but because in their expectations, in their gaze, we so easily abandon ourselves. That's not love, that's bad faith. Sartre's great enemy is the quiet tragedy of becoming a character in someone else's story instead of the author of your own. Whether you're a 20-year-old drowning in unread texts or a 50-year-old trapped in a marriage that feels like silent extinction, the shape of the prison is eerily familiar. You lived for her, but the man who lives for her, he dies by her indifference. This isn't bitterness, it isn't rage, it's metaphysics. Sartre taught us, consciousness is empty until it chooses. We are not born with a fixed essence, we become. And the man who forgets this truth, who convinces himself that a woman will complete him, save him, define him, he gives away the steering wheel of his soul. And she knows it. Whether she's 19 and driven by instinct or 45 with emotional depth, she feels it. She sees when you've placed her at the center of your identity, made her the reason you breathe, sacrificed your essence for the illusion of connection. And that's when she pulls away. Not to hurt you, but because desire cannot thrive in captivity. It suffocates. It dies in the absence of space, risk, and freedom. Your freedom. The young man doesn't know this yet. He still thinks love is transactional, that effort guarantees devotion. He hasn't yet endured the agony of giving everything, only to watch her eyes wander towards someone who gave nothing but his presence. But the older man, he knows too well. He sits in silence beside a woman who once burned for him, before he smoothed out his edges, before he traded mystery for safety, before he abandoned being other for being predictable. And now, though she stays, something has faded, because deep down, she never wanted safe. She wanted sovereign. That's Sartre's most jarring revelation. The human heart aches for what it cannot own. And the man who doesn't need her, who can walk into her life and just as easily walk out, is the one who electrifies her spirit. Not because he's playing a game, but because he remains whole within himself. You've seen it. The man who doesn't chase, who doesn't plead, who remains unmoved by emotional storms, he's the one she can't forget. Not because he manipulated her, but because he never abandoned his being. Yes, you want love, that's human. But the second you believe you need love to be someone, that's the moment you vanish. This isn't a tactic. It's an existential truth. You vanished the moment you needed her love to define your worth. But this isn't about tactics. It's about reclaiming something deeper, your existential integrity. This is not a performance. This is existential integrity. It's about becoming the man who exists on his own terms, who defines himself before he defines love. The man who chooses his values first, who stands rooted in purpose before he reaches for connection. And if love arrives, it revolves around him, not the other way around. And if it doesn't, he remains whole. That is the man women are magnetized by. The rare kind, the Sartrean man. The man who understands that true freedom often comes at the cost of solitude and embraces that cost without complaint. You've been taught to open up, to share more, to be vulnerable, to voice your needs, to express how much she means to you? You thought these gestures would invite her in, deepen your bond, earn her trust, but instead, the more you revealed, the more she retreated. The more honest you became, the colder she grew. You believed that transparency would bridge the gap, but instead, it evaporated the mystery. You became too known, too accessible, too safe. Why does this happen? Sartre had the answer long before any dating coach did. The human being is not a finished product to be admired. You are a living projective or becoming. And when you shrink yourself to your feelings, your stories, your wounds, you confuse vulnerability with essence. You mistake raw confession for masculine presence. You offer your soul before she has even earned the right to hold the map. And instinctively, she recoils not because she lacks compassion, but because the masculine, in its truest form, is not a boy pleading to be understood. It is a force, a presence, a grounded being that does not need validation to remain upright. Sartre called this being for itself, a man who stands unshaken, who defines his reality from within, who owns his freedom fully, not recklessly, not carelessly, but intentionally. The kind of freedom that says, I refuse to be shaped by your needs. I will not shrink to fit your idea of a man. I am already whole. Ever wonder why that older man at the bar grizzled, composed, unreadable draws, her gaze longer than the chiseled boy flexing at the gym? It's not the gray hair or his silence, it's the price he's already paid. He has lost the woman who walked away when he stopped chasing. He's bent himself into pleasing shapes until his soul cracked. He has learned the hard truth. Love bought with performance is not love at all. And now, when he sits in stillness, it's not a strategy, it's a monument, a living proof that he has survived himself. He no longer explains. He no longer overextends. His silence roars louder than 1,000 clever words. Young men often confuse noise with presence. But older menthos who've walked through fire know that the deepest power lies in stillness, and she feels it, even if she can't explain it. There's a tension, a magnetic pull, something ancient awakening inside her. It's not comfort she senses, it's danger. Not physical danger, but existential. The presence of a man who cannot be owned, who cannot be manipulated, who will not flinch when faced with her insecurities. A man who will not crumble just to keep her calm. That dissonant state stirs something primal. And because of that, she will test him. She will push, withdraw, stir chaos, dressed as passion anything, to see if he bends. She needs to know, does this man stand on solid ground, or is he just pretending? And if he chases, if he begs, if he explains himself into exhaustion, he collapses. From man into mirror, from essence into shadow. But if he doesn't flinch, if he remains grounded not to gain power, not to win, but simply because he is, then something in her shifts. She feels what Sartre called the anguish of freedom not his, but hers. His presence forces her to confront the truth. She cannot own him, reshape him, or guilt him into compliance. And in that anguish, paradoxically, she feels desire again. Not because he played a cold game, not because he withheld love, but because he reminded her of the one thing every woman secretly wants, a man who cannot be moved from himself. In that moment when she faces your freedom, desire returns not because you withheld, but because you stayed rooted in who you are. But there is something she feels, yet cannot say aloud. That the masculine is not meant to seek approval, it is meant to stand. Like a mountain that does not flinch in the face of storms, the masculine holds its ground, unmoved, unyielding. So remember this, when the urge creeps into please, to fix, to explain, when you feel the pull to smooth things over or say what she wants to hear, because she doesn't crave a man who needs her like air. She longs for a man who breathes deeply even in her absence, a man who is whole without her presence, And when you become that manot just in appearance, not as a posture, but in truth, she feels it. It's not something she can always describe, but she knows. She may stay or she may go. She may never say it, but she will remember you, because men like that are rare. She knows it. The world knows it. And there's a moment quiet, almost invisible, when a man begins to disappear into her expectations. It doesn't come with sirens or flashing warnings. It's just a soft second, a subtle choice. You say yes when your soul whispered no. You round your truth to avoid tension. You hide your boundary in fear she might walk away. And in that seemingly small moment, you betray yourself. Sartre gave this betrayal a name: bad faith. It's when a free man begins to lie to himself, not because he's cruel, but because he fears the discomfort that comes with freedom. You dress it up as love. You call it maturity. You justify it as compromise. But if you're honest, it's not noble. It's not conscious. It's a quiet extinction, a slow death of your inner fire, a soft, civilized suicide of the man you used to be. And you think she doesn't see it? She sees it, always. Even if she doesn't understand how, she feels it when you begin to orbit her instead of standing firm in your own center. When your truth bends under the weight of her emotions. When your words get filtered, your tone adjusted just to keep the peace. She notices when you start living to avoid her storms instead of facing them like a man. And she mourns, not just for you, but for the man you once were. The man who met her with mystery in his eyes. The man who stirred something unstable and electric inside her. The one who made her feel alive, feminine, slightly unsure in the best possible way. Now you're dependable, predictable, safe. And yet, you see it in her eyes. The spark, gone. The gaze no longer lingers. Her touch, brief, distracted. Her laugh, it feels rehearsed. And you sit there, confused, saying to yourself, but I did everything right. And yes, that's the tragedy. You did everything right. You became accommodating, devoted, gentle, responsible. And in doing so, you became wrong in the one way that truly matters. You stopped being you. She didn't fall in love with your kindness. She fell in love with your edge, your distance, your lack of need. The part of you that was wild and untouched by her influence. That man, the one who walked into her world whole as the man who made her heart race. And this is where the older man, if he's truly honest with himself, confronts a painful truth. He no longer knows who he is when she's not looking. He spent so many years being the provider, the protector, the dependable rock, that somewhere along the way, he lost the boy who used to dream wildly under the stars. The boy who spoke without hesitation. The boy who didn't ask for permission to feel, to leave, to be. That boy was closer to the truth than the man who replaced him. But don't despair. This isn't the end. It's the doorway. Because everything you've been told about manhood shrinking with age, it's a lie. Real manhood doesn't shrink. It sharpens. It clarifies. It burns cleaner. But only if you stop lying to yourself. And the biggest lie, that her love is the prize. It's not. The real prize is this: the man who stands whole in the presence of love. The man who does not dissolve himself for connection, who does not trade identity for intimacy, who can fully love a woman without letting her define him. And here's the paradox. The moment she senses that she no longer owns your identity is the moment she finally relaxes into being with you. Because only then can she trust that you're real. Once she senses you're no longer defined by her, only then can she relax, because now she knows you are real. And yes, this will feel like rebellion, because it goes against everything you were ever taught. You were conditioned to serve, to please, to chase approval like it was currency. But Sartre saw through the illusion. He exposed the truth that real authenticity requires something terrifying, that you become the sole author of your life, that you generate your own meaning, that you wake up every single day and choose yourself over and over again, no matter who stays or who walks away. And if she walks away, then let her. Because if you are truly the rare man, the kind who does not crumble in her absence, then you were never abandoned. You simply return to yourself. And she may return, or she may not. But either way, you remain. And that is the only path worth walking. Here's the paradox no one wants to believe. You have never been more magnetic, more captivating, more unforgettable than in the moment you stop needing to be. But most men never get there. Why? Because belief in that truth requires experience. And most men never give themselves the chance to find out. They don't endure the silence long enough. They can't sit in the discomfort of solitude. They jump ship too soon. They crawl back with apologies. They bend their truth for acceptance. They fold under the weight of her disapproval. But the man who stays standing? The man who does not flinch when her fury demands answers. The man who holds calm when her love turns cold, expecting him to chase. The man who remains rooted, not because he's playing some manipulative game, but because he refuses to lie to himself. That man becomes unforgettable. Why? Because that man has become real. Sartre spoke of authentic existence not as some lofty idea, but as a lived reality. He meant a life where a man embraces the full gravity of his freedom, where he chooses deliberately, where he carries the burden of his choices without pretending to be smaller than he is. That, right there, is the core of true masculinity, not performance, but presence. And presence like that, it changes everything. She feels it, even if she doesn't understand it, even if it unsettles her, because it awakens in her the raw truth. She too is free. She too must choose. And here is the shock: being in the presence of a man who does not orbit her emotions, who does not adjust his path to avoid her discomforted, forces her to face her own. And suddenly, her desire returns. Not because he chased, not because he proved anything, but because she remembers what it feels like to stand in front of a man who belongs to no one. And this truth, it's ageless. You could be 70 years old and still feel the fire of the boy you once were, the one you buried beneath years of pleasing. You could be 24 and choose now right, now not to ever hand over your identity again. And no, it doesn't start with big speeches or dramatic exits. It starts with small, powerful refusals. The refusal to send one more desperate message begging for clarity. The refusal to speak just to fill the silence. The refusal to say you're fine when your soul is quietly screaming. The refusal to sacrifice your energy just to avoid conflict. You were not born to be liked. You were not designed to be chosen like an item on a shelf. You are here to become, to grow, to stretch, to exist with such inner gravity that even in stillness, the world leans toward you. Not because you demand it, but because you embody it. That is the legacy of the Sartrean man. The one who refuses to trade his soul for someone else's approval. The one who finally realizes every time he silences himself to be accepted, he's not just losing a moment, he's losing a piece of his soul. And your soul, brother, is not something to be bargained with. Not for love, not for peace, not even for the illusion of security. Because here's the part no one will tell you. If she truly respects you, if she's truly ready for a man, she won't leave when you reclaim your freedom. She'll meet you there. When you reclaim your freedom, not out of rebellion, but out of truth, she won't flee. If she's truly ready, she'll meet you there in that sacred ground of shared wholeness. Not as a prize you won with performance, not as a reward for saying the right things, but as a woman sovereign in her own soul choosing you, not because you need her, but precisely because you don't. And if she cannot meet you there, if she turns away when you stand tall in your truth, then she was never truly yours. She was merely your reflection, your mirror. A haunting echo of the parts of yourself you once abandoned to be loved. So step out of that mirror. Shatter it if you must. Let the fragments fall. And walk forward. Alone and not in emptiness, but in raw, radiant power. Because only in that silence, only in that sacred solitude, will you finally encounter the man you were always meant to be. The one who doesn't chase, doesn't cling, doesn't compromise his essence. The man she cannot leaven not because he's perfect, but because he is real. Now you're beginning to understand this isn't about pride. It's not about withholding affection to control. This is about truth. And truth is the only thing worth bowing to. Here's the truth they never told you. You were never incomplete. That myth, the idea that you needed her to be whole, was planted the moment you looked at her and whispered, "She's what I've been missing." But Sartre would interrupt you and say, "No one completes you." Because to be completed is to stop becoming. And when you hand someone else the pen and say, "Write my story," you surrender not only control, you surrender yourself. And a man without authorship, he's not a man at all. You can see the cost written in the eyes of older men. Their gaze is dim, like old photographs faded, heavy with unspoken stories. They don't speak of their regret. They joke, they shrug. But you can feel it in the pause between their words. They gave up too much. They sacrificed their edge. They stopped writing their own pages. Now they live in chapters that no longer carry their voice. And you see it in younger men too. The ones who parrot her beliefs, echo her moods, reflect her politics. They say all the right things. But beneath their smile is desperation, a silent leash wrapped around the will. They don't even realize it's there, but she does. She may not mention it, but she feels it. That subtle weakness, not of muscle, but of willing, it dries her desire like wine over flame. But the rare man, he keeps writing his own book, even if she never reads it, even if no one reads it, even if that story leads him straight into solitude. And here's the sacred secret, one Sartre implied, but never quite said aloud. When a man is willing to walk alone, truly alone, he becomes irresistible. Because that aloneness isn't exile. It isn't punishment. It's a forge. It burns away the noise. It strips you clean until all that remains is something no one else could create, you. That kind of solitude is where authenticity is born. Not the kind that hides from the world, but the kind that emerges unapologetically real. And when that man speaks, he does not speak to be liked. When he gives, it is not to obligate. When he stays, it is because he chooses to. And when he walks away, he does so with no need to look back. That kind of man changes the room not with charm, not with status, but with weight. The weight of someone who belongs entirely to himself. And she feels it. Not every woman will be ready for that. Most are used to men who fold at the first sign of conflict. Most are accustomed to emotional acrobatics and theatrical vulnerability. They're calibrated to men who perform, who comply, who vanish the moment things get real. But some women, the right ones, will feel you not in their mind, but in their nervous system. They will feel safe. Not because you coddle them, but because, for the first time, they are in the presence of a man who will not vanish into their expectations. A man who will not disappear just to please. And that is rare. You have some women will recognize the man who stands whole or not because he mirrors them, but because he refuses to vanish. And in that rare recognition, your story truly begins. You've always been told to chase, that love is a pursuit, that the man must move, must reach, must win, but no one told you the price. Because the more you chase, the more you erase yourself. Let her come to you not as some trophy for your efforts, but as a sacred test, a moment of truth. Can you remain whole in the face of beauty? Can you stay rooted when she cries, when she pleads, when she storms, when she tempts? Can you hold your ground not out of cruelty, not from ego, but because you finally refuse to lie? If the answer is yes, then you will stumble into a kind of freedom that few men ever taste, a freedom untouched by validation, untouched by her approval or praise, because now you have something greater. Now you have yourself, and within that self, you will find not only strength but peace, a peace that doesn't beg to be seen, a peace that doesn't perform, a peace that knows who it is, even in silence, especially in silence. You are not the same man you were when this narration began. Something subtle has shifted. Maybe it's quiet like a gentle breeze through your ribs, or maybe it's roaring like a storm breaking loose after years of stillness. Either way, you feel it. That stillness inside of you no longer feels like loneliness. It feels like home. You're not stretching anymore, no longer contorting yourself into the man you think she'll love. You're not auditioning. You're not trying to be chosen. You're simply being, furled, and letting the world revolve slowly, rhythmically, around a self that no longer compromises. This is what Sartre understood so clearly, hidden between the lines of being and nothingness, etched into the silence of men who've dared to ask the question, what am I if not what they want me to be? And the answer? You are nothing. And from that nothing, you are everything you choose to become. No script, no savior, no role, just you and the terrifying beauty of authorship. And that's why most men run into women. They run into work. They run into distractions, wine, war, validation, anything to avoid the raw, unbearable silence of their own freedom. But you chose differently. You chose to carry the weight. You chose to be the source. You chose to create meaning instead of borrowing it. And in that radical act of being, everything changes. It doesn't mean you no longer feel. It doesn't mean you don't love. It means you don't collapse. You can be touched, but not reshaped. You can be moved, but never removed from your core. You can offer love and not from hunger, but from overflow. And now, she feels it. Whether she's 25 or 62, radiant or hurting, grounded or lost, when she stands in front of you, she feels something ancient awaken. A gravitational pull that doesn't beg. A sovereignty that doesn't bend. And maybe, just maybe, she stays. Or maybe she doesn't. But for the first time, that's not the story anymore. Because you are no longer building your story around who stays. You are the story. She can read it, or she can walk away. But what she cannot do is rewrite it. This is your arrival, not into power, not into dominance, but into the sacred stillness of a man who remembers what he is. He is not a mirror. He is not a mask. He is not a watered-down version of himself waiting for permission. He is. And now the world must decide what to do with that. Because you will not beg. You will not kneel. You will not trade your soul for a text, a touch, or a momentary high. You will walk forward without needing a witness. And that is the man they remember. That is the man who lingers in her mind years later when the bed is warm but her spirit is cold. That is the man she cannot forget. That is the man who no longer asks, what went wrong? Because now, he knows nothing went wrong. He just hadn't arrived in himself yet. But now you have, and from this place, everything begins. Not with strategy, not with seduction, but with silence. A silence that is steady. A silence that is sovereign. a silence that is unbreakable. Because this was Sartre's shocking truth. Women don't fall for men who need them. They fall for the rare man who doesn't. And if something in you woke up while listening, if this stripped away a lie you've carried for too long, if this reminded you of a self you forgot how to be, then like, share, subscribe. And if you want to support this message, this movement, click the link below. Because this isn't just a narration, this is a return.